happened to my Kleenex? Literally so sick. I even sound congested. Hey Ohio, did you know that Trans Unity Coalition officially launched its Ohio chapter? That's right, we are finally bringing all the awesome nonprofit action your way. It's gonna be fun, right?
Within the past hour, the Ohio Senate passed legislation known as the Bathroom Bill.
Right?
House Bill 8 requires schools and teachers to notify parents about any changes, including if they identify as LGBTQ+.
There is no hidden agenda here.
Oh.
Chair recognizes Representative Manning.
Mr. Speaker, I move that Rules and Reference Committee report on referrals be agreed to.
Hearing no objection, the motion is agreed to.
Oh my.
Breaking news at 4, an appeals court has blocked Ohio's ban on gender-affirming care for trans minors.
House Bill 68 also prohibited trans women and girls from participating in sports.
Okay, it's gonna be interesting, but we are here to do our part because despite the obsessively loud haters, you are all absolutely valid. With Ohio becoming increasingly more dangerous for trans and other marginalized communities in Ohio, there's one current piece of legislation that's really important to point out. House Bill 96, titled Make State Operating Appropriations for Fiscal Year 2026 to 2027. This bill was introduced by Representative Brian Stewart, who represents Ohio's 12th district. As of Wednesday, April 9th, House Bill 96 passed in the Ohio House and will now make its way to the Senate. This multi-page bill covers a great deal of budgetary allocations and changes for July 2025 through June 2027. And as much as I wish I had the time to cover its many flaws, let's get to why you're probably watching this video. How does this bill impact the transgender community in Ohio? And for that, we formally have a few major concerns here. 1. Unhoused trans children. The Department of Health General Revenue Fund contains a dedicated category for what's called youth homelessness, which is meant for homelessness in youth and pregnant women by providing assertive outreach to provide stable housing, including recovery housing. Combined for 2026 and 2027, there's approximately $5.5 million set here for this fund. However, the following provision has been added to it. Youth homelessness. No funds shall be distributed to youth shelters that promote or affirm social gender transition in which an individual goes from identifying with and living as a gender that corresponds to the individual's biological sex to identifying with and living as a gender different from the individual's biological sex. In essence, if a youth shelter is deemed to support even just a single trans kid, they can lose their funding. This will put shelters in the terrible position of either having to actively hinder one's personal journey or kicking these kids out of their shelters. And sure, realistically, it may boil down to someone being a true ally and just keeping things a secret, but realistically, no trans kid should ever have to be in that position, feeling like the government absolutely rejects them simply for who they are. 2. Mental health providers. The Department of Medicaid has a set of budgetary fund groups with a combined total of $83.5 billion. The Finance Committee snuck in this amendment on Tuesday, April 8th. This amendment specifically adds the following. To the extent permitted by federal law, no funds appropriated in Section 10 of this Act shall be distributed for mental health services that promote or affirm social gender transition. This was added in with an additional 1,018-page document introduced at the last minute, to which Representative Stewart essentially said,
The chair recognizes Vice Chair DeVilla.
I move to amend substitute House Bill 96 with Amendment 2698-1. And the public is able to view these changes on the Ohio Legislature website.
Are there any objections to accepting the omnibus amendment? Hearing none, the omnibus amendment is accepted.
Yes, I'm sure everyone had the time to read it, especially since it's essentially as long as the whole Bible. 3. Designating LGBTQ+ books as 18 or older. This one's a pretty straightforward provision, which unfortunately says the following. A public library shall place material related to sexual orientation or gender identity or expression in a portion of the public library that is not primarily open to the view of persons under the age of 18. And therefore, placing even books intended for queer and trans youth in 18 or older sections only. It should go without saying that censoring media, which provides a role model for kids coming to terms with their identities, is only going to lead to trauma and mental health struggle. It's going to up the demand for therapy, strain mental health services even further, increase ER visits, and honestly, just remain counterproductive if the goal is to budget finite money. Oh, and like, it's a shitty thing to do. 4. The adaptation of one of Trump's executive orders. This is an unoriginal adaptation of Trump's executive order defending women from gender ideology extremism and restoring biological truth to the federal government, which does what I'm sure is their best attempt effort to define male and female strictly on sex and pivot away from gender. Now, in principle, I love biological truth, although I typically just call that the field of biology. In fact, this is precisely where my degree in biochemistry and molecular biology excels. Let's look at what Ohio's version says. Actually, let's not, because this is a budget bill, and I'm honestly not convinced that somebody who took biology beyond the 10th grade level actually wrote the original executive order or adapted it to the Ohio version. I will say though, I think it's neat that they expressly acknowledge gender. It's actually fairly progressive. Too bad they basically go on to say, no thanks, we don't want an A, after they paint it in a bad faith manner. Now, the adaptation of Trump's executive order to this overall bill was an interesting choice by Representative Stewart, due to it being unconstitutional per Ohio's Constitution. And let me tell you why. Article 2, Section 15 of the Ohio Constitution contains what is known as the one subject rule, which says the following: no bill shall contain more than one subject, which shall be clearly expressed in its title. In practice, this means that multi-subject bills are illegitimate. And while modern interpretations of this clause have provided leniency to allow for more legislative discretion, the Ohio Supreme Court case Dix versus Celeste did clearly establish the following. For when there is an absence of common purpose of relationship between specific topics in an act, and when there are no discernible practical, rational, or legitimate reasons for combining the provisions in one act, there is a strong suggestion that the provisions were combined for tactical reasons, i.e. log rolling. Inasmuch as this was the very evil the one subject rule was designed to prevent, an act which contains such unrelated provisions must necessarily be held to be invalid in order to effectuate the purposes of the rule. Now, as deplorable as these other prejudiced inclusions are, I'm sure Representative Stewart would say, oh, well, they relate to funds and the use of funds. Of course they relate to the bill's subject title. But I'm also sure this character would say a lot of interesting things like, your fetus, my choice, or at least Hitler didn't smoke weed. However, on the subject of this executive order adaptation, there's quite literally 0 words or anything to do with budget, funding, allocations, or anything to do with House Bill 96. In fact, that's why I skipped a breakdown of it, despite me really wanting to flex my science muscles here. Let's look at what the Ohio version says. Actually, let's not, because this is a fucking budget bill. Woohoo! So the courts might eventually need to take a peek at that, and I'm sure it'll take however many months and however many tax dollars out of your and my pockets. Thanks, Stuart. Also, if you thought I was done, sorry, I'm still counting bad things in this bill. 5. Flag banning in state facilities. Pretty straightforward, and like the last one, literally has no impact on the budget. Section 30, Division A. Except as provided in Division B of this section, no state agency or any entity that manages the grounds or buildings under the control of a state agency shall display on the grounds or building of any flag except for the official state flag, the United States flag, or the prisoner of war missing in action flag, because banning pride flags and trans flags from all the offices really helps with the price of eggs. So overall, this budget bill is massive and unfortunately cannot be covered in its entirety by one person in a nonprofit that desperately is in need of volunteers. Such bills do absolutely deserve their full grace of analysis by and for the people. Its many provisions are of course going to divide people by working class, industry, or where the money actually goes, but to go one step further and intentionally target the transgender community, to arbitrarily cut funding away from mental health providers, should they support somebody who may already be on their transitional journey, to exacerbate the homelessness crisis in Ohio despite it increasing by 3% last year, and target that directly at transgender kids. Like, what do you think? Leave a comment below. And from there, what are all the things we can do about this? Well, for one, follow us and stay up to date, because there is, so much going on. 2, these anti-trans provisions aren't likely to be removed without a lot of drastic awareness. And even if they aren't removed, it is that awareness that prepares them for legal challenge, whether in the form of a line item veto or an official court challenge down the road. To that end, spread the word, share this video, or even just re-explain things to your friends and your family. 3, the fun one. I could sit here and tell you, if you call Representative Brian Stewart, that it could re-spark some basic empathy. But I think we know that it won't. However, did you know there's another purpose for calling? Imagine that Turning Point USA volunteer trying to make a phone call through to their office to talk strategy, but they can't because their line is busy talking with you as their constituent. I guarantee you, with 480 minutes or so in a working day, having a few hundred people call or leave a voice message in a day actually obstructs office productivity. Don't be rude or violent. They will just hang up immediately. Actually engage with them. Spark a conversation. Humanize the person that they are attacking before them. And even if they don't care, at least they are unable to pick up that phone call from somebody just 4 degrees away from Charlie Kirk. And if you're interested in that route, here's a number. Maybe an email. Likewise, a better outreach strategy might be just directly reaching your own elected official. Genuinely tell them your concerns. And again, don't be rude. You're gonna get some intern who answers the phone who barely makes any more than a service industry worker, overworked and juggling everything in that office. Give them an opportunity to listen. Hone in on those talking points. They do remember what you say, and they do relay what they're hearing. And lastly, find community. I'm convinced there's about 200,000 other trans people in Ohio alone who feel just as scared and frightened and far apart as you do. Reach out, share your experiences, get mobilized and get ready to act. Because it is people like Representative Stewart who expect you to be so broken that you do nothing every step of the way. Never make it easy for them. Don't let them get that. Thank you.